what would success look like? Pause before you go any further and think about success. What do you really, if everything goes the way you want, what will have happened? So success is both the attributes of success. It may be how the business strategy, how do you compete, or it might be.
Welcome to Adapt or Die, transformative leadership conversations where top leaders unpack the pivotal moments that force them to pivot or to perish. My name is Andreas Pedersen. I'm a former tech CEO that turned executive coach, and I'm a founder of Leaders Adapt. Today's guest is Rick Williams. For the listeners who didn't hear this, can you give a little brief introduction to who you are more, Rick, and why did you end up writing a book?
Well, thank you. It's great to be on with you. It's fun to share the story because, as you start a new project, and I understand you're in the process of writing a book. Yeah, the question is, I got to tell you, writing a book is hard work. And unless you're on the faculty at Stanford or Harvard or someplace like that, where, okay, that's what you're expected to do all the time is write books, and they just count the numbers. But anyway, through my consult, people would ask me, because I do a lot of writing on how to be a more impactful leader for your company or any organization. People ask me, well, Rick, have you written a book? Like, okay, if I had written a book, should you not pay any attention to me? It's like, what really is the meaning of that question? And as I thought about it, I said, there's an awful lot of people writing books. Do I really have anything to say as a book that would be, a valuable contribution to the literature on leadership? And as I thought about it, what most of my consulting clients were asking me to do, me and my case teams, I work for Arthur D. Little, big international consulting firm, and work for mostly large clients, both public and private. Mostly they were asking me to help them make difficult decisions, even though they may not have actually said that exactly. And as I thought about it, I thought that one of the differences between a large organization is that they can pay $500,000 to McKinsey or BCG or somebody like me in a former life to help them come in and go through a difficult decision-making process. And I thought that the principles and process for making tough decisions is one that really should be available to all the leaders of all organizations. And so that's what my book, Create the Future, is about. It's about how to make difficult decisions, starting with what really is the opportunity you have, what would success look like, all the way through to now that you've created real options for yourself, how do you choose what you're really going to do? So anyway, that's A, what the book is about, and B, that was the reason I wrote the book, because I felt that there needed to be effectively a leadership handbook that leaders of mid-sized and smaller companies could use with, leadership team whiteboard exercises that help them go through the step-by-step process. What should I actually be doing when I have a major threat that's facing me and I really am not sure what to do? How can I go about actually go through the steps that will give me the best chance of getting this right? Anyway, that's why I wrote the book, and that's what the book's about.
I love it.
It's great to be on your podcast here. It's fun to talk with smart people like you who've gone through a lot of this.
I can relate. I've been a CEO for 7 years. I was an executive for longer than that. And soon as someone says difficult conversation, it's like the hairs on my back goes up and the memory comes back of those key moments that were really do or die moments. And this is what the podcast is about. I want to help other people, other founders, other executives that are challenged and they have to make the difficult decisions, how to do that. And I think by picking the brain of brilliant leaders in the industry, we might help them not get the scars we had. But I still found it fascinating. I have to ask you this, Rick. It's like people ask me the same. They have asked multiple times, have you written a book? Is that is that, I mean, why? Like, yes, like you have 50,000 followers on your newsletter. You have a whole lifetime of experiences. Shouldn't that be sufficient? And when I opened up your LinkedIn, the first time I saw it, I'm like, wow, this guy have lived in the trenches, and this guy have worked his way to the top. Is like, why the book? Is it because they want sort of the distilled version of who you are? Is it a credibility thing? Like, is there a specific reason?
Yeah, I it's a tough decision for someone like yourself, like me, who are not in the business of writing books. That's why I've mentioned
Yeah,
somebody in the faculty who, because that really is their job. Their job is to write books so they can have a long list of academic credentials. I will say that even though I thought that I really understood that this topic, that writing this book was very helpful for me because it got me to think much more carefully about, what if I it's like, if you want to really learn something, teach it.
yeah,
And that's part of this process, is that by having to explain it carefully to someone who may not know anything about the topic, you have to be much more careful in your own thinking of, all the shortcuts that we go through in life when we're doing something. If you actually have to sit down and say, okay, here's step one, here's step two, then you'll understand it much more clearly yourself. I don't know, maybe this is too much detail, but I will just say that in parallel with writing this book, I mentioned the book has 25 or so leadership team whiteboard exercises you would take your leadership team advisors through. So in parallel with writing this book, I actually wrote a workbook which has an elaborated version of the team exercises. That workbook is not out yet, but it will be coming out.
that's amazing.
And the discipline of saying, okay, in Create the Future, the book, are a it's not a superficial summary, but it's a highlighted summary of the team exercise. You can use them to do essentially the core steps of the exercise. But if you have to write out, okay, instead of 5 steps, you're going to write out 15 steps of doing the exercises, it's a much more disciplined approach to making sure you got every step, gotten every assumption into it. And I actually wrote those in parallel so that the exercises that are in the book exactly match the more detailed exercises that are in the workbook. And it's the discipline that if you don't go through it, you are, and it's not you or me, it's just everybody in our position assumes, well, everybody knows what I'm talking about. Well, actually, really, everybody doesn't know what you're talking about. And you have to be really careful to be clear that when you're saying, okay, you usually don't need to get more, you usually don't need to get more creative people in the room. You need to give people permission to be creative in their dealings with you as a leader. I mean, that concept is fundamental to getting you and you yourself and your team to the place of saying, well, what really could we do in this tough situation, as opposed to, well, gee, I think we should do that, or are we okay with that? Let's rush ahead and make a decision. That is the way to make bad decisions that get you in trouble. You're much better off to step back for a second. Do we really understand what's going on here? What are the different ways we might solve this problem? Not the specifics, but by categories. Could we raise revenues by, by a different way of pricing something? Can we raise revenues to bring new products in by buying a different company? If you're saying the goal is to raise revenues, we got to get revenues up. What are different ways we could raise revenues? Not just, well, what's the best idea we could pick off the wall right now to raise revenues? That kind of creative process goes back to giving people permission to be creative and free to come up with ideas, even crazy ideas, because the crazy ideas might not themselves work, but they might get you to thinking about a way to solve the problem that you otherwise would never get on the table without the crazy idea. And you have to give people make people comfortable that if they put a crazy idea that'll never work on the table, that's great. You should be celebrating that rather than, oh, Mary, that's crazy. Why are you even talking like that? That is not the way
No,
to get
that's the
the
worst
best
thing you can
solution.
do in those situations. And
Exactly.
I'm super curious here. So you say you want to get the people to speak up, you want them to feel safe to do so, to not be
Right.
judged, and you should not judge them. How do you foster such a culture? And in a tough situation where you need to make a difficult decision, how do you recommend that the leader create that safe space so people truly share what they know and what they think?
I'm gonna if you'll give me permission, I'm just gonna say one thing about me as a leader or you as a leader that you have to start with. And I use the phrase, I'm going to answer your question, but I want to say this first because it's very important about this particular part of the process. And that is, I say that leaders need to be both decisive and they need to be vulnerable.
Yes.
Decisive means that you're willing to make decisions. And often that in itself is hard for leaders to do. But also, leaders need to be vulnerable. They need to be willing to say, actually, I might be wrong about this. I will be better if I pause for a second and ask other people. I don't mean just anybody, but ask your leadership team or maybe key advisors, what are you thinking about this? I'm not giving up my responsibility as a leader to make decisions, but I am saying that I want to hear other people's points of view.
I love
So
it.
that frame of mind of both being decisive and being vulnerable is the first step to making creative and important decisions that will impact the long-term future of your company. So having said that, I recommend that if I use the term get an advisory team, or what I call a create the future team together to help you go through the process. Now, this could be your key leadership in the company. You might have a board of directors. I mean, you may want to bring in one or two outside trusted advisors. But I would make sure that within that group are people with different points of view. I mean, depending on what situation, maybe you want to make sure the head of R&D is there, your marketing director, your CFO. You know, I I think you ought to get that, make sure the person is in there who sort of has the crazy ideas. I mean, you do also want to have the practical person who says, well, wait a second, let's make sure this will actually work. You want to have that kind of person in the room also. And then say, okay, guys, this is what I think the problem is. I need your help to get through this because I, as the leader, in the end, I want to give you assurance that we will move ahead and do the right thing or something. We'll make the decisions. We're going to move ahead. But before we do that, I at least want to hear your inputs on this. Now, some people do things like say, okay, we're all going to wear crazy hats or do something to say we're going to be more creative. But really, you have to be clear that you are giving permission for people to, to speak their mind, to say, gee, boss, I'm not sure you're really thinking about this right. Or I know somebody who did something like this that took a different approach to that. And I use the whiteboard team exercises because you need to make sure you write on the whiteboard what the people are saying. I was in being on the board of directors of a company once. I was in a board exercises with trying to deal with, are we putting money into different of these subsidiaries of the company, that the CEO of the company led the whiteboard exercise. And I could just see while he was doing it that he wasn't writing what people were saying on the whiteboard.
Cardinal
And it
sin.
wasn't,
That's
honestly,
no
I don't
go.
think it was because he was saying, I don't like your idea. I really think it was because he was saying, gee, I'm kind of thinking about that as opposed to writing it down. He would have been better having somebody else, as somebody on his staff at the whiteboard, writing the stuff down. So it's acknowledging what people are saying. It's getting it up so everybody can see it, and separating himself from the process. So I recommend that actually you as the leader shouldn't be at the whiteboard. You should have somebody else at the whiteboard and have you as a participant that's digesting what people are saying, and also being clear that what goes on the whiteboard is the value that people are creating. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling on with your
No,
answer, with my
I
answer to the
love it.
question here, but that's the kind of thing I would do.
You're dropping gold. And you have no clue how much I agree with your leadership mindset. And I don't always hear this in US, especially being European, having lived in US for more than a decade. When I'm going to go all the way back to, I just want to recapture this for the listeners, because this is important. You say a leader have to make the decision, but they have to lead with vulnerability. They have to create the
Right.
safe space, and they have to be curious on their employees. I love that. Curious on their ideas and put the right people in the room. The other thing you said is, and I agree so much with this, dear listeners, if you are a leader and you're up on the whiteboard and you're dominating who you listen to by taking some notes from some of the people in the room and not others, you're failing. Get a facilitator,
Right.
get someone else to take all the notes in the room, because otherwise you're indirectly telling people who are more valuable and less valuable, and you need to capture everyone objectively. I love the fact that you pointed that out. You have no clue how many times I met CEOs who they have an idea, and then anyone who speaks that confirms their idea, they take the note, they put it on the whiteboard. Anyone who goes against them, it becomes a discussion and confrontation. Guess who is sitting quiet in the end of that meeting? The people he should be listening or she should be listening to.
Right.
Gold, Rick. So keep rambling. but
let me just add one more thing to this particular element. We all have different, I don't know, styles. We say strengths, weaknesses, but I'm going to say style here as who we are as a person. I also think that if you are participating, you've gotten to the step of saying, I'm not going to be at the whiteboard. I will be a participant. Also think about your style and how will you most learn from this experience? So, for example, some people, I'm just going to give some examples here, but it's mainly to think about what your style is. So, you might be somebody who says, "Look, I have some ideas of my own that I'd really like to test. I'm going to put some ideas on the board and hear how people react to them." Okay, that's good. Another would be that that there are people who are in the room with you that are, put out ideas but really don't want to defend them or advocate. You might be the only one in the room who can say, "Well, look, Joe, I hear you saying that, but I want you to really, I want to probe you as to why that would work or not work." And you might in a way have to be the one who can challenge somebody to bring their ideas forward more. So I mentioned test your own ideas. You might have to be a challenge person. On the other hand, you might also be somebody who says, "Look, I know people are going to want to be swayed by whatever I'm saying. The best thing for me to be is pretty quiet here, and I want to step back and give myself room to change my mind on this. I might want to be less engaged because I want to give myself maneuvering room here to change what I originally was thinking here. So it might be better for you to be a little bit more quiet. Think about yourself, who you are, and what your best role in this is, as you as a leader participate. If you'll give me permission, I also like to go back to one step back for 1 minute, to the title of this book is Create the Future. And I was surprised in talking with people during the course of writing the book about how how often people do not associate what they're doing, what do not associate their decision making with the fact that they are creating the future for their company by the decisions they're making. And so one of the starting points that I hope to make with people who read the book and is that when they make decisions for the company, and we make decisions every day. We make lots and lots of decisions. But the decisions that we make are, when we make those decisions, we're creating the future for that company. When Polaroid, for instance, Polaroid Corporation, which dominated the instant film business, they spent an enormous amount of money developing digital photography. But they did not want to bring their own digital photography technology into the marketplace because it would compete with their film sales for the instant camera, their Polaroid's instant cameras, and they didn't do it. And so other people came into the marketplace with digital photography that Polaroid could have done years earlier and put Polaroid into bankruptcy. So the decisions that the Polaroid board and their leadership were making not to bring their own digital photography technology to the market put them out of business.
Yeah.
And what I'm hoping people will do is make the connection between what I'm hoping leaders will recognize is that they create the future for their company tomorrow by the decisions they make today. That is their role as the leader. Their role as a leader is to make decisions, and they're making decisions that create the future for their company. That is their principal job. Their principal job is to create the future for the company by the choices they make, by the decisions they make. And that connection is the underlying premise of the book. And then the book outlines how you make those decisions to get them right. And I just want to make sure that I'm articulating the full concept of create the future. You create the future by the choices you make today. And here is the best step, best process for making those decisions that get you closer to decisions that reach the goals you've set for yourself and the company, express the values of the company, and also express your risk preferences for the decisions you're making. I'm probably talking too long, but I just want to make sure that as you're gathering together the key points here, that the underlying key point is that we as leaders, our principal job as a leader of our company or any organization is to create the future for the organization by the choices we make.
When you work with leaders today, Rick, or when you have worked with them in the past, do the leaders always understand the magnitude of their decision making and the impact it has on a long-term perspective? The reason why I asked this more leading question is I've stumbled upon a lot of leaders who make decisions in a vacuum, and they do not understand how significant the impact can be in a long-term perspective. I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
I've been surprised myself how often people do not make the connection between what they're doing today and the future of their company. You could say, well, there's an obvious connection. Why even talk about it or think about it? On the other hand, people often say, well, I don't believe you can create the future. It's like a sort of a fatalist. Well, yeah, we make decisions today and whatever happens, happens and blah, blah, blah. Boy, that is not the right way, in my opinion, to run your company. I mean, it's like saying, okay, the future is going to be whatever happens as a result of what I do. Yes, that's true, but you can change what will happen with your company or your own life for that matter by the choices you make. I mean, one of the things that I talk about is that success is a choice. So I within create the future, there's a 5-step process you go through. Okay, what really is the opportunity or threat? But step 2 is what would success look like? Pause before you go any further and think about success. What do you really, if everything goes the way you want, what will have happened? So success is both the attributes of success. It may be how the business strategy, how do you compete, or it might be what's your business model, how do you make a profit? I mean, what is the aspiration of success? And then secondly, how do you measure success? If you say we're going to increase EBITDA over the next 2 years, okay, how much are you going to increase EBITDA or sales revenue or whatever it is? Here in the U.S., Nick Pitino, who is a very famous basketball coach, wrote a book called Success is a Choice. And what his book was about, and what he said in the book was that the moment when the very talented young basketball players he was working with changed from their view of success was that they were going to be a talented basketball player to they were going to be a champion, that was a choice that they made. And those that made that choice changed how they were living their lives in order to move from being a talented young basketball player to being a champion. How they were practicing, how they were eating, how they were sleeping, how they were thinking in their own minds about themselves. Success is a choice. And success is a choice for every company. Do you want your company to be a high growth company? Do you want it to be a lifestyle company? Do you want it to be one that's going to take risks and maybe you'll win and maybe you won't win? Do you want it to be a company that is, generating revenue for yourself and your family? Or do you want it to be one in which is going to be a high growth for your employees and investors? So success is a choice. And when we talk about creating the future, you're making a choice about where your company will be in the future by the choices you make today. I mean, I use the term success is a choice, but also, are we going for a moonshot in which failure is a real possibility? Or are we developing a children's medicine in which you cannot fail? Failure is not an option. So when we think about creating the future by the choices we make today, the choices we make today are going to determine are what is setting on that path to wherever the success is that we've defined and are going after. That's why I want to be clear that, on the whiteboard, on a piece of paper that you paste on your office or whatever it is your quick notion of what success will be, and all of the decisions you make are going to be geared to achieving that success. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's how I think about it.
Wow. This is like a masterclass in leadership. Again, we're fully aligned, and I think I'm going to extrapolate what you said, and I'm going to take it even away from the boardroom, even away from the executive team, down to individuals living their normal lives. I meet a lot of people who reach out on social media and ask for advice on different things. And the number one thing that they say, I hear this quite often, is, I've been so unlucky. And I think it's the same with success. I think if you decide that you're going to be lucky in life, lucky things will happen to you. It's the same with success. It can correlate to anything. So if we have any of the listeners here who listen to Rick, and he mentioned this in the context of leadership and companies, it's to anything in life. And that's the whole point here. People who decide I'm living a happy life, you live a happy life. People who decide that life is hard, life is going to be hard. It's what you make it and how you choose to have a perception about what's happening into you in your life. There is a very famous, Rick, you probably, I don't know how much you're into Stoicism as a philosophy, and I always butcher the Latin, but amor fati in Stoicism philosophy basically means is to fully accept the faith of what is happening to you in life and even embrace it, even if it's negative. And that's exactly what you're talking about being successful as well. If you decide what the success and the future is, it's going to happen. But Rick, how many leaders do you meet that are just going along and that they have a business plan? They haven't looked at it for 2 years. I meet those all
Oh,
the time.
absolutely.
Is it the same for you?
I'm going to go back to success as a choice. So as you were going through this, I'm thinking to myself, you are, I think you're in Sweden right now, or from Sweden originally. I'm thinking about climbing up a mountain. You know, a lot of people are going to get to the first rest lodge and say, okay, this is fine. I'm happy here. I can, make my life here and be very comfortable. And then another group of people are going to say, well, gee, I'd really like to go up to the next level. And it's not easy. You're going to climb over the rocks and trails and blah, blah, to get to the next level. And at that point, it's not as comfy and, they maybe have bunk beds and whatever at the next lodge level. And, another big group of people will say, well, okay, this is, as far as I want to go. But there's then a group of people who will say, I really think I can do something with this idea or technology or my vision of what the internet could be or AI or whatever it is. And they're saying, it might be irrational and it's not going to be easy for me and my family, but I'm going to try to get up to that next level up. And that is the process that we all go through as business leaders. I'm not making a judgment about what you should do. If you say, hey, look, I want to have a comfortable life for me and my family, and that's my goal, I'm saying, wow, that's great. I'm going to celebrate that. If you said, I'm in my dorm room in college and I have an idea for something that might really change the world, I'm going to say, wow, if you don't do that, we may never have the benefit of that. And it may make your life crazy, and a life that I or other people wouldn't want to have ourselves. But I am depending upon you to take that crazy idea and try to get to the top of the mountain. That's how our life as human beings evolves and changes for the better. And I'm going to celebrate that too. So that is, that's a choice that you as an individual make. And I think we should celebrate all of those aspirations for you, for whatever it is that you want to do. Just be really good at it, be great to your employees, be innovative and clear about what you're trying to accomplish, and we'll celebrate it.
Really good. Really good. Let's go into a lightning round now, Rick. And I'm going to ask you, I did not prep you for this. I'd never prep my guests. I want you to answer short, precise, the first thing that comes to your mind. No, like it needs to be like top of mind instantly. Okay. Are you ready? Most common decision-making traps. So behaviors, processes, this is just the way we do
picking
it.
Up the word. I apologize. I'm hoping we'll edit all this out, but I couldn't pick up the word quite. Okay.
We will.
The most common trap, I think, is, okay, I don't want to stand out. Why would I stand out and take the risk of being different than everybody else? I'm just going to go along and keep my mouth shut. I think that is the most common trap that we find, particularly in things like boards of directors or groups where a group of people together and they all just want to get along and not rock the boat. I think that's probably the most common trap.
Agree. One leadership rule you never violate, Rick.
I got to tell you, the leadership rule I don't violate is I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to lead based on who I am and my values as a person and my values to the group that I'm in.
I love that answer. What's one book, except your own, that you frequently recommend others to read?
Well, I think the book 7 Habits of Highly Successful People is one that I highly recommend, and I'm hoping to Create the Future will, in a sense, be a parallel book to that. That book is about how you improve your performance as an individual, and my book, Create the Future, is about how you improve your performance as the leader of your organization.
Love it. Favorite quote on leadership or action?
Favorite quote on leadership, like, don't give up the ship. We haven't even talked about sailing. I'm a sailboat racer, and I've written a really great article on everything I learned about leadership. Everything I know about leadership I learned on my sailboat. We haven't talked about that, and as a Swede, I assuming you know something about sailing as well. But that would be my quote.
Love it. Which is the one decision throughout your entire life, in business or in personally, that you're most proud of?
I got to say, in retrospect, I'm most proud about having decided to actually write this book.
I love it. And I think it's such an amazing fact that you basically said it early in the conversation here. You're distilling it. You're doing introspective. You're thinking. You're getting curious. You're boiling something down to something very valuable in the process of writing the book. So I compliment you really for doing that. As soon as it's available, or is it available today?
Oh, no. Absolutely. Create the Future came out in the fall.
It was the workbook that was coming next to it.
I tried to convince the publisher to put them both out at the same time. Oh, no. Let's get this book out and get it started, and then we'll deal with the workbook. So, but it'll be out. So, no, if you go to RickWilliamsLeadership.com, RickWilliamsLeadership.com, that's my professional website. You can get information on the book. You could download an introductory chapter if you want. You can actually order the book through the website, or you can go directly to Amazon. I would, if you go to Amazon, go to Create the Future, and that's Create the Future Rick Williams, because there's another book called Create the Future on Amazon, just to not confuse the two. And so you can order it directly through Amazon or order it through my website.
And if people want to sign up for your newsletter, or they want you as a keynote speaker, where can they find you then?
The easiest thing would be I'll give you, since I think you have a great audience here, I'll give you my direct email address. It's Rick, R-I-C-K, at RickWilliamsLeadership.com. So just send me an email, and you can sign up for the newsletter on the website, but it might be just as easy to just send me an email, and then I'll get it to the right people.
And you have 50,000 already. Yeah, say the email address one more time.
So it's Rick, R-I-C-K, at RickWilliamsLeadership.com.
Awesome. Rick, you have dropped some amazing nuggets here today. I really want to thank you for joining the podcast. I think the conversation today solidifies a lot of my beliefs in leadership, and it's very refreshing to hear it from your perspective as well, with all your life experience. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
Well, it's been great. Fun to have conversations like this, and I hope we'll stay in touch and maybe do something else in the future.
Absolutely. And for all the listeners out there, please help this podcast by going to Apple Podcast and leaving it a 5-star review. Also, make sure that you follow us on Spotify. Just search for Adapt or Die. And also, please remember this: in leadership, we adapt and thrive, or we don't survive. Until next time, thank you, everyone.